Oh,
All
hi there.
right.
Looks like we're online.
Yeah, we are. All right. Whoops. There we go. Sorry, I had the volume on the stream, getting a little feedback there. All right. So I am Billy Carando here, and I'm here with Paul, Tasty Meats Czarkowski, and we are going to be doing, is it mob programming, you said, Paul?
Yeah, that's right. Mob programming, or attempting to. I think I may be a mob of one. We are having some technical difficulties between StreamYard and Linux, so I have to share. I can only have one screen, so I can't actually see chat. I can roll with being a mob of one, but if people are participating and people do want to see certain things, just jump on the stream and shout at me, and I will try and redirect myself.
Absolutely. Well, I'll go ahead and say online and then pass along any questions I see in the chat, whether it's in the chat here in the stream or in Slack. So either way, I will pass your questions along to Paul. But until then, I guess you're going to want to be showing your screen. So I will go ahead and get that up. Let me get that added. And from there, I'll go ahead and let you get going.
Okay, great. So you can see my Firefox window here, right, with the Helm website up?
Yep.
Okay,
yep.
great.
Everything looks good.
All right. So my name is Paul Czarkowski. I'm a developer advocate at VMware, and that's about all I want to tell you about myself, because I figured we would just get on with this, given we don't have a ton of time. So I wanted to kind of do this mob programming exercise where we just started from scratch and wrote a Helm chart for an application of the audience's choice. Given we have poor communication because of my poor choice of running Linux on a desktop, I thought 2020 might be the year, but I guess it's not. So I will just roll with being a mob of one. And I'll go ahead and I'll use an application that I already know a little bit to try and make things a little bit easier and a little bit smoother. So first of all, we have Helm. If you're not familiar with it, as their website says, it's a package manager for Kubernetes, and they attempt to be the best way to find, share, and use software built for Kubernetes. So let's test that out. So if we go down the website a little bit, we will find installation instructions. I already have Helm installed. And also this thing called Helm Hub, which is where existing applications are. So if we click across to that, you can see there's a ton of apps. There's over 1,200 applications already on the Helm Hub. Obviously, anytime you do a demo, the first thing you demo it with is WordPress. Somehow still in 2020, that is our go-to thing. So somewhat tongue-in-cheek, that's what I'm going to roll with. When I see multiple Helm charts for the same app, I'll often hit the Bitnami stuff because I've found that to be quite reliable. And so we'll go ahead and look at this. And you can see here that they're claiming that simply adding their repo and running Helm install is all we need to do to actually install an app. So let's actually try that out and see that that actually works. I have made my text really big. Hopefully it is readable. Problem with really big text is you can't actually read anything. See if we can drop that down a little bit. You can see when we do it, it gives us a bunch of notes. It tells us how to access our application, etc. So let's go ahead and actually look what's happening here on Kubernetes. I have my Kubernetes cluster up. I'm in my default namespace. And you can see I have now a couple of pods, so WordPress, but also a database. You can see I have a deployment, a replica set. We have a stateful set. So this is the Helm chart, clearly standing up a number of resources to get us working. And then I believe we should also have a service. We have a couple of services, and it actually is a typed load balancer, and it already has set up a load balancer on Google Cloud where this cluster is running. So once my application is up, I should be able to hit that. And so I can see my application is up. I look at my pods, and you can see they're not quite ready. I assume MariaDB probably takes a while to get started up and probably has to load up the default WordPress database. So that probably takes a minute. And I would bet it's also creating persistent storage. Yeah, it is. So it's also connecting to Google Block Storage and getting volumes to mount up into the pods. So that's probably why it's taking a hot minute. You can see now it is claiming 1 of 1 ready, 1 of 1 ready. So if we do that get service again, there's an IP address there. And so we should be able to hit that up. And hopefully we get a response. If not, there we go. And we get a response, right? So that looks like what we expect. So we can open that up in a browser. And there we go. Hello world. I assume I can start writing blog posts and stuff. So that's, I feel like that's Helm living up to what they set out their mission to be, which is a good way to find, share, and use software built for Kubernetes. So now we've kind of seen that in action. We should actually go ahead and create our own Helm chart and see how we go. So let me close that down. So I'm going to use this app. It's a simple sample app that the Spring project uses. Spring is a Java framework. And so we're going to go ahead and run this. And I've already cloned this down to my laptop just to keep things speedy. So here's their application. And you can see, first of all, I don't see a Docker file. I do see a Docker Compose file. And that looks like they only use that to set up the actual a backing database. So I'm not 100% sure just from looking at the repo how to build it. However, I do know that Google has a project called Jib, which is the Java image builder. And I think we can go ahead and use that. So let me bring back my browser. And here is Google's Jib. And I can, basically it lets you containerize a Maven project, your Docker project, without even needing Docker installed on your machine. And you can simply run this line here. You can actually add it to your pom.xml, but the last thing I'm going to do is start editing XML on a live stream. So we can go ahead and cheat and use this like so. And so if we do that and we just give it an image name, clinic, I believe we can just run that. And that's going to go ahead and compile the project, which I did cheat and already do so that we would speed through this a bit quicker. Hopefully it happens really quick. I probably should have done a skip tests. I'm not sure if there's any tests for Pet Clinic, but I should have told Maven to skip them. But again, it should happen fairly quickly. Yeah, there we go. And see, it's actually now building the image and pushing it up to Docker Hub. And it's not using Docker at all. I do have Docker installed on this machine, but it's not using it. And so you could use this on your Mac. You could use this on your build server without even needing Docker installed, which I think is a super powerful thing. And because it's already pushed up to the Docker registry as my image, we could actually go ahead and just deploy it and make sure it works. So let me clear this screen and let me delete the Helm chart. Let me create a new namespace. We'll work inside that just so we don't see a bunch of noise from other stuff I've already installed. All right, so we've got nothing in here. Now I've aliased K to kubectl, so if I type K, it's just shortcutting to kubectl. And then I can go ahead and create a deployment. And I've shortcutted that already. And see, I'm creating a deployment. And so this is just to test that the app is working, because I don't want to go to the effort of building out a Helm chart if the app's not going to work. We do get pods. It looks like it's already running, and I can do a port forward into that. And I believe it listens on port 8080. And then I open up a browser, localhost. So kubectl port forward actually forwards localhost into the pod you're looking at. And that way you can access it without needing to expose your app to the internet. And this looks to be working. So that is great. Let's go ahead and kill that off. So delete deployment. PC. So we've got nothing running, or it's terminating that. And we'll go ahead and create a Helm chart. So I already have a deploy Helm. So Helm CLI, I have it installed. Obviously, I can do Helm help and get a bunch of information. And they have a Helm create, which will create a Helm chart for me. So let's go ahead and do that. Helm create pet clinic, and we'll see what we get. Creating pet clinic. So let's have a look. You can see it created a directory with a bunch of files in it. It's got chart.yaml, and chart.yaml is basically the metadata about your chart. It's got values.yaml, which is a set of default values that will be rendered into the templates in your chart, and then a bunch of templates. So it already has things like a deployment, service, ingress. So all the things you would usually have for a Kubernetes application, they've put together the scaffolding for that. Let's jump across to VS Code, and we can have a look at what it's given us. So here's our chart.yaml. We don't have to do anything here for now, so we'll leave that. Here's our values.yaml, and you can see it's calling for a image repository, Nginx. So it's going to pull Nginx. We don't want Nginx. We want our Spring Pet Clinic here, and so we'll save that. And we'll look for anything else that might seem wrong. This port, I think we need port 8080. And then I don't know that we'll need this, but let me just set petclinic.demo. We'll give it a potentially real DNS and see how far we get into getting that working. And then in templates, so here is our deployment.yaml. You can see this looks like a fairly standard Kubernetes YAML file, except there's a bunch of these curly braces or mustaches or whatever you like to call them. And this is where the templating language will insert values. So you have some things that are, these are coming from some functions that are provided. And then these are the actual values coming from the values file. And so one thing I do need to roll down is find this guy here. And just right now, by default, it will call this chart app version. And I'm not sure I want that. And so I'm going to do this right here and set tag. And then I'm going to come back to values, come back to my image and do tag. And I assume it'll be latest. So we have a deployment that I think is going to work now. Let me check the ports. Okay, so there's the ports. Again, 8080 here. And then liveness and readiness probes. I'm pretty sure this will work, but there's nothing more frustrating than Kubernetes constantly killing your application because the liveness probe is failing. So just for now, I'm going to comment those out, and we may come back to them later on if we have time. So I think this is all we need to actually deploy our app to Kubernetes. So let's go ahead and do that. So pet clinic, and then Helm install. We're already in the namespace. We want to install it. So we just want to give it a name, pet clinic. And then we want to install from the local directory. So we can just do a dot. And so that's done it. And it's printing out some notes. And those notes are actually rendered from this notes.txt. So it looks at different values that are set. You can see it'll give you a different set of notes if ingress is enabled or if there's a node port. And so that lets you provide instructions on how to access your application once it's up and running, which is really useful for new people. So here it's giving us a bunch of commands we can run to access it, effectively port forwarding like I had just done earlier. I already know how to do that, so let's clear it off. We'll have a look at our pods. You can see we have our application running. And so we can do we have a service. We have a service. It is a type of cluster IP, so we're not getting a load balancer or anything. which is fine for now, because I think we probably want to try to get an ingress working. But we can do a quick port forward into here. 80. And just do another double check that we are working. Localhost 80. So this is the new version we just installed with Helm. And you can see it was almost just as easy to actually create the entire Helm chart as it was to do the initial, create deployment. And so that create experience is pretty consistent with what you would expect for Kubernetes. But we actually got a fair bit more stuff because we also got the service and some other bits and pieces. So let's go ahead and end that. And so I guess the next thing we want to do is figure out how to actually expose this to the internet, because we don't want to tell our people wanting to use our pet clinic that they need to download kubectl and do a port forward just so they can bring their sick dog in to come and see us. So let's come back here and go back to values. And you can see we already have some ingress stuff set up. So in theory, if I run true here, and then there are some annotations I can set. And then you can see I set my hosts and paths to go to. And I can also set TLS. And I like, well, let's start and just try and get ingress working. Then we might try and get TLS working. So I think we can just go ahead and run it as is. Let me uncomment these because these are actually can be useful because that's telling it to make sure if I have multiple ingresses to use Nginx. And I do have ingress set up on this cluster, so this should work. I need to take that out. Now, normally I would make changes in a separate values file and link to that in Helm, but often when I'm first creating a Helm chart, I'll just do it directly here and then sort of make the values file a bit more generic before I actually publish it. And so adding that ingress, I think, is all we need to do because I have Nginx running inside my cluster for the ingress. Cluster IP is okay here. So I think I can go ahead and update our deployment and see what happens. So Helm LS, you can see we have our Helm chart running, installed. And so we can do a Helm upgrade. We called it Pet Clinic, and then dot. And that'll read that values file that we just changed. And so this should upgrade the, okay. So we have an error and that's looking for a path. And so let me show you where that is. I'll just clear the screen and bring it up here, make it a bit bigger in case you can't see it. So it's looking for spec rules 0 HTTP, looking for field paths. So we come back to values, ingress, paths. So I think I want to do that. So let's try again. Okay, that looks better. And now, interestingly, instead of giving us a bunch of port forward information, it's now telling us that we can go to this URL, which is pretty remarkable. But I haven't done any DNS work, so this URL probably won't work. So what I can do is do a get ingress, if I can spell. As you can see here, here's the host, and this is the address of the ingress. So I can throw that into, if I just do a HTTP of that, it'll give me a failure because it's actually, an ingress is like a set of rich rules that use like the host name and the path to determine which backend service to send the traffic to. And so I could do like a curl x set of hosts and stuff, but I might just take these two items and throw them into my hosts file. Set empty hosts. And of course, it's backwards. So that's saved off. And so now if I do a HTTP of that, we should get what looks like a valid HTTP response. We come back to our browser. I'm used to having multiple monitors and switching virtual desktops. So now we should put in our URL here, and it is going to work. Obviously, connection is not secure. That is something we can deal with. Now, on this cluster, I also have a thing called external DNS, and that is hooked up to my Google DNS where this domain is hosted. So actually what's happening in the background in my cluster right now is external DNS is working with Google Cloud DNS to actually register this host name to the IP address of the ingress. And that's all happening without me having to really do anything at all. And so let's see, sometimes it's really quick. Clearly you can't do that, Paul, come on. And in fact, is that, oh, actually, comment that out, obviously. Still working. So maybe DNS is already set up. Can I do this? Is it? Yeah, so if I actually ask Google itself, it has already gone and registered it. And so now I legitimately have that as a valid URL. So it's no longer in my Etsy hosts, but it is still working. So you think about everything that was happening right there, and it all happened within a couple of minutes. There's probably more I can do. It would be nice to secure this. And so there's this TLS section here in values. So let's fill that out and see what happens. All right, so let me set that to that. I think that's what I need. And then this we'll call pet clinic. And then there are some annotations I need to make for the Let's Encrypt and Cert Manager operator on Kubernetes will work together to create a certificate for me and put that certificate into a secret. But I need to tell the Cert Manager operator what I want it to do. And so I'm going to cheat a little bit. And I have some existing charts here with some annotations that I already have. And so I think I just need to grab these guys right here. And I tend to add this because anything using authentication tends to overload the Nginx default proxy. So I almost always add this in as well. So let me do that. And these are annotations that will end up in the ingress resource. And you can see here, it is saying, okay, I want this to, I want to tell Cert Manager about this. And I'm going to say what cluster issuer I need. So I can set up different issuers with different CAs. So if I want to use a self-signed or if I want to use a real certificate, this is all set up to use again, it uses my Google DNS as as the Acme challenge. So Let's Encrypt will confirm that I own this domain before it gives me a certificate. And so I think this is all I need. And I can go ahead and do another upgrade and we'll see what happens. Upgrade. And you can see it's doing things like keeping track of the revisions. And you can also see it's now giving me HTTPS here for my URL. So it's seen that I've enabled TLS and it has updated that. So that's pretty handy. I'm going to expect it to take a few minutes. So this will probably fail. And in fact, it does. And so what's happening here is the Nginx ingress controller has like a default unsigned certificate that it will use if it's still waiting to get a real certificate, just so that I can at least test things. So if I was to go to my browser and plug this in, Let's open it in a new browser tab. We get that usual potential security risk. We'll YOLO that, and right. So there it is. It is HTTPS. You can see we have that warning there because it's a self-signed certificate. And so we'll try again in a few minutes and see where that's at.
Hey, Paul. So we have about 5 minutes left. So we're kind of in the Q&A section. And yeah, while that maybe updates, we can maybe see at the very end here if, that resolves the SSL issue. So we do have one question so far. So you mentioned how there is Jib for a way of creating a Java image tool that Google offers.
Yeah.
Is there one for like .NET, or is there ones for maybe other languages that aren't Java?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few ways you can do it. And of course, off the top of my head, I'm not going to think of them. I think Red Hat has a tool called Podman, which doesn't use Docker. It's sort of a replacement for Docker. And that will let you build images without needing a Docker daemon running. And it will do it without needing escalated privileges. You don't need to run anything as root. And I believe that's a full replacement for Docker. So you could literally on a Red Hat box do alias Docker equals Podman and use it exactly like it was Docker. There is also a project from Google, which I can't remember its name, but it will do it straight from Docker files and build images without needing Docker. And Kaneko, I think it is, spelled with a K. And that's often used inside of Kubernetes when you want to build images from like a CI system that's running inside of Kubernetes. You don't want to give access to, root on the host system. You don't want to give access to the Docker daemon on the host system. So using a tool like Kaneko or using Podman or using a tool like Jib gives you another way to do that in a non-privileged way. And so generally speaking, I'll reach for one of those if I'm doing something in the CI/CD realm.
Okay, yeah, nice. Yeah, I learned a lot about Helm charts from here. Like for me, up until this presentation, Helm charts was just like mostly a word that I heard a few times, and I very, very lightly touched it one time. But that makes sense. Like it's kind of like higher level recipes or scripts for putting together more composed applications. This is kind of adding more and more layers on to what Kubernetes done. You have containers, you have Kubernetes, and you have now Helm charts to kind of continue to kind of stack those layers, so that way you don't have to worry as much about the lower levels behind that.
Yeah, that's right. And what I haven't shown you is actually creating a shareable artifact is quite simple. You do Helm package, and it'll create a signed tarball. And then to host your own Helm repository is literally a static website with a index file and then a list of charts. And those chart packages, and the Helm project team has actually built tooling, including all the GitHub actions required to build that out from your own charts repo. And so I took JJ Asgar through it the other week, and within like 2 hours, we'd built a Helm chart and actually were hosting it on a public Helm chart repo on GitHub pages. That's awesome. So that's quite amazing. You can get it going that quickly.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say share that in the track called Cloud Native chat in the Slack, and also maybe post that out on your Twitter, so people who maybe are watching this can also kind of check that out. Because I would definitely be interested, because for me, I always kind of need like maybe some sort of simple example of something actually in use to really understand it. Because like sometimes like, okay, I can read it, but then I'm like, how does this all actually work together? So I'm sure that'll be helpful for me. I'm sure it'll be helpful for many other people as well.
Yeah, that's right. And I actually just checked, and the certificate is now correct and resolving. And so that website is now fully secure, as much as a website can be. So I just put a link.
I'll send you my credit card number and social security and everything.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Great. So I dumped the link to that in the Cloud Native track Slack. So if anyone wants to test the veracity of my claims, they are more than welcome to. If you're smart enough to hack me, I would appreciate it if you didn't. It's the internet, so do your best.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much, Paul. And we'll go ahead and keep on rolling here now.